During my time with Ghost of Tsushima, I had a lot of ups and a few downs, and the downs almost made me completely stop playing the game, but in the end, I'm glad that I decided to power through and making my way to the conclusion, because honestly, this game is so impressive. I have a lot of positive things to say about this game, and whilst I don't think it needs a sequel, I do think that if they decide to make another one, there's a couple of little missteps they can avoid to take this game from being just like really fun to being pure greatness. Now let's face it, they're probably going to make a sequel. Ghost of Tsushima has sold like hotcakes, and the general consensus seems to be very positive from the major markets, including Japan, which is a really big deal. I mean, I think this is probably the greatest samurai game I've ever played. I'm actually still playing it post the main story, and I gotta say, as I said before, the game is really impressive. Keeping with tradition though, I'm going to be starting this review off with the smaller things, and we're going to work our way into the bulk of the game. So without further ado, let's just jump into the beautiful land of Tsushima and break this shit down. Now, I'm gonna begin on a negative unfortunately, but I have to get this out of the way before we progress with the review. Ghost of Tsushima has far too many irritating glitches. Is it as bad as something you might find in Fallout or Elder Scrolls type games? No, it's definitely not that bad. Are they significant enough to make you roll your eyes and say I'm done for the day? 100% they definitely are. I've gotten stuck on objects, been unable to move the camera around, falling through the floor mid-battle, which somehow still left me open to attacks, and one of the most annoying ones I received was when I was almost done with a mission and I got this glitch, and I haven't seen anyone else get this glitch. I got this irritating glitch that turned my entire body into an always active sword, and the worst thing is the glitch persisted even when I restarted the game. You heard that correctly. This meant that I couldn't travel via horse, so Kage, my horse that I called Kage, was literally just useless. I couldn't use him at all, and this went on for like at least 3 or 4 hours, because every time I got close to Kage, he'd run off in pain because it's actually slashing him. I was getting the slashing sound every time I got close to him, and I couldn't do standoffs either. Anytime I went to engage with an enemy in a standoff, I'd automatically lose because I was literally a walking sword and I couldn't do anything to prevent it. There was nothing I could do, so I couldn't take part in standoffs. At first the glitches didn't bother me too much. It was like whatever, glitches exist in games, especially a game of this scope, it's gonna happen. But they just kept piling up, and it was one after the other, and it got to the point where I was like, what is actually happening here? The glitches that I encountered are only the tip of the iceberg. There are whole threads on Twitter dedicated to the glitches in this game. There was a bunch I didn't even get to see that I saw other people experiencing. It's excusable when there's 1 or 2 glitches here. Even for a game as big as this, it's excusable when there's a few glitches, a few more than you would expect, and by no means is it as bad as something as like WWE 2K20, which is probably the biggest joke I've ever seen for a full price game, period. But for a AAA title, there's just far too many spread across this game, and it's a little bit disappointing. It's not to say it ruined my entire experience, that's definitely not what happened, but there's a few too many for a game that I found this impressive. It brought it down a little bit. Now, on a positive note, as far as I can see, this game has absolutely no microtransactions whatsoever, not a single one. Everything that you can upgrade to make the game more enjoyable and easier to explore can be done in-game without the need to part with your real money in any way, shape or form. I think we've become so used to microtransactions that when a game doesn't have any, we just overlook it. So shout outs to Sucker Punch for not putting any microtransactions in the game. If they did put them in there, I completely missed it, but from what I can see, there's none. Now, the voice acting in this game is really good, surprisingly. I was not expecting this game to be some sort of like epic narrative piece like I guess you consider some of the other games that have come out this year, but the voice acting in this game was really good. It's a very serious game with a very serious tone, and so everyone talks in a very straightforward, stoic kind of manner. There are some light-hearted bits here and there, but they're mostly reduced to one-liners and some dialogue you're having with another character in between missions. It makes sense as the Mongols have invaded the Japanese, started kidnapping people, killing them and taking everything they own. Of course, nobody's been walking around feeling particularly good apart from this one guy called Kenji. Kenji is weird, but my one gripe with this game is that they didn't lip sync for the Japanese voices, and I really liked some of the Japanese voice actors. The main character Jin Sakai is voiced by Kazuya Nakai, who also voiced my favorite character character in One Piece, Zoro. And Lord Shimura is voiced by Akio Otsuka, who voiced Old Snake in Metal Gear Solid 4. But because of how out of sync the mouths are with the Japanese voices, I reverted back to using the English ones. Now luckily, the English voices in this game are absolutely brilliant. Daisuke Tsuji does a great job portraying Jin Sakai. I hope I'm saying his name correctly, I apologize if I'm not. And honestly, I had zero issues with the English dub. It is what you'd expect of a samurai epic if it was done by people speaking English. There's no posh English accents, there's no southern accents, because all of the voice actors of significance in this game are from those regions. They're from these Asian regions, but they're just speaking English. You can hear it in their voices. It's a good job all around. I have zero complaints about the voice acting. I was pleasantly surprised. The sound effects and music in this game are absolutely top notch. Again, zero complaints to make on either. The music is what you'd expect from a samurai epic, and it does not disappoint throughout the entire game. It blends so well with the atmosphere of the game. Calming music plays as you ride through the colourful lands of Tsushima, but that music can just as quickly change when you encounter the Mongols. It will suddenly become much more intense, a lot more fast paced. In one-on-one duels that kind of act as boss fights through the game, the music can be calm, it can be heavy, or it can be barely hearable, which all work to the game's benefit. Every slash you take into your enemy sounds as you'd imagined it. The screams the Mongols make as they run away in fear from the ghost are exactly the screams you'd make if you encountered a samurai of this nature. Even down to the wind blowing in the trees as some cool Japanese samurai music plays in the background. This game just does a perfect job of making you really feel like you're the ghost and you're really in Tsushima fighting for the freedom of your people. To me, this is one of the game's strongest suits. The way the areas are constructed and the way the colours blend together are so good that it might be my favourite use of colours and music in any game. I'm not saying it has the best music in any game, but the way the colours, the music, the wind effects and general atmosphere all work in tangent, it's just a work of art and something to behold. If this is the last major PlayStation 4 exclusive, then no matter what you think of the game, objectively the PS4 will be going out in style. Ghost of Tsushima may be the best looking game of this generation. Now I'm well aware that the graphics on the faces don't beat out games like The Last of Us or Uncharted, but it's everything else that makes this game my favourite graphically. Just look at this, look at it, look how absolutely stunning this game is. Objectively, it's just gorgeous, there's no two ways about it. Where a lot of people will argue that The Last of Us is #1 in terms of graphics, and you'd be fair to say that. It's also not a very colourful game, and colours are at the forefront of this game. I get why it's not, and I get why they designed The Last of Us in that way, but Ghost of Tsushima's colours are just breathtaking. A lot of the NPCs don't have the attention to detail that Jin and the other supporting characters do, but they do look good nonetheless. The whole world looks like it's alive at all times. You never go to a spot on the giant map and feel like they didn't put enough effort or detail. Everywhere you go looks stunning, and I've never seen any popping issues on this game at all. Overall, I know why someone would argue that another game looks better, but to me Ghost of Tsushima sits on throne as #1. The wind system probably gets overlooked by a lot of people, but it's actually excellent. It means that when you're walking around, there's absolutely no need for a minimap to help you get to your destination. You just flick the touchpad upwards and the wind will guide you to where you need to be. And most of the time you don't even need to use it. The wind will very subtly blow across the grass and trees in the direction you need it to be. It's a great addition to the game. There's also this little yellow bird that will appear sometimes when you're near a location you haven't marked, so you can veer off track and follow the bird and then go right back to what you were doing. All of this helps to give you the sense that you're actually in an open world game that has no restrictions. You can even take on camps that have very high amounts of Mongols in them. The game does warn you of this, and I never managed to beat those camps, but I think it is possible because I beat a lot of people inside them before I was taken down. Either way, you'll be able to beat them at some point in the game. But my point is that this game makes you feel like you're actually in the world of Tsushima and you can do whatever you want. A lot of other open world games claim to be open world, but they restrict you and they make you do certain missions. There's a lot of level brigading going on in other games, and it just doesn't feel like you're open to do what you want, and that's just not the case in Ghost of Tsushima. Also, I did not know this until I finished the main game, but the weather changes depending on your approach to a fight. I think if you fight more as the ghost in a stealthy way, you'll get more lightning and thunder. You can also obviously change the weather with your flute as well, but still, it's a great addition to the game. Ghost of Tsushima features the most impressive photo mode since Spider-Man for PS4, and that was a tough one to beat in my opinion. Dare I say it's actually better. The landscapes are absolutely gorgeous, so it's an absolute no-brainer that it'd be much more fun to take pictures in the world of Tsushima. I spent a decent amount of time doing this and I got some really cool shots, but I'm not as creative as some of the other people I've seen on the internet. You can get some really cool stuff from it. Now, for those of you that don't know, Kurosawa is arguably the most important figure in all of cinema. Arguably. He's definitely up there when you want to talk about the all-time greats. You can see that a large majority of this game was influenced by his work, and it's absolutely awesome. For me, I'm a bit of a Kurosawa fanboy. In my room I've got about 5 or 6 Kurosawa films, and I've seen much more, I just unfortunately don't have them. But I love Kurosawa's work. Stuff like Seven Samurai, Throne of Blood, The Hidden Fortress, No Regret for Our Youth, the list just goes on and on. If you haven't seen any of Kurosawa's films, definitely go and check them out. So to honor his legendary work, Ghost of Tsushima has a Kurosawa mode where the screen becomes black and white and has that old school grainy effect. The sound effects and music get altered to fit the mood, and honestly, for fans of the essential samurai films of the past, this mode is absolutely a must. Now I gotta be honest, the enemies in this game are kind of disappointing. First of all, the Mongols historically were way more varied in both their skill and tools during this period in Tsushima. Secondly, the Mongol Empire did not solely consist of just Mongols of one tribe. The Mongols conquered a number of places before reaching Tsushima, so the armies actually included different pieces of technology from various parts of the world, including warriors from China and Korea. Now considering the scope of Tsushima, it would have been nice to see some more enemies, and don't get me wrong, I'm not shitting on the game for not being historically accurate in this regard. Ghost of Tsushima gets a lot right with its portrayal of the samurai, but it also gets a lot wrong, and honestly I don't mind it. It doesn't put me off the game at all. Most of it is things you won't even notice, like Bushido not being that honorable, katanas didn't actually exist in this period of Tsushima, Chiburi was not performed on the battlefield, and the Kamakura era depicted in this game does not actually look like this. The area in this game looks like the Edo area because of how popular that era was in video games and just general pop culture. But that's fine with me because games are supposed to be fun and cool and exciting and all of the nice things that make you feel in between. So if they move a few things around here that make it not so historically accurate, I don't mind. The only thing I do mind about is the Mongol army, because that's an inaccuracy that actually costs the game in terms of combat and challenge variety. The Ronins represent a decent challenge when you finally start going up against them, but overall I think Ghost of Tsushima is a bit too easy. The enemy's attacks are too easy to read and too easy to get around. I think there should have been a mode where the red and blue indicators are turned off completely, because as soon as they flash, you know what's up. Lethal mode doesn't really help this because one hit modes are kinda lame, but on the flip side it does offer some pretty intense moments. It's just the enemies could have been a bit more intelligent. Sneaking around them is way too simple, to the point they actually avoided doing it while I was playing the game because it just makes things a little too easy and a little too boring, at least at the beginning of the game. When you unlock more abilities, you can do some really cool stuff with stealth, but that gets old as well because of how easy it is. Overall, the enemies are a bit lackluster. You've got the Ronins, you've got the bandits, and from the Mongols you've got archers, you've got guys with swords and shield, big dudes with axes or this like big gun I guess that shoots fireworks at you. You've got guys with spears and some other things I missed here and there, but again, for a game of this size, for how long it is when you factor in side quests, it's not really a good amount of variety in terms of enemies because they do the same thing over and over again. Even on hard mode, enemies will wait around you kinda like Batman whilst you kill their comrades, which I found weird. It's not like the Mongols fight with any honor, so this was another thing where they got a bit of inaccuracy there. I would have preferred it if everyone attacked you at once. It would have made the gameplay a lot more fun, but then if you get hit once, all of a sudden they start swinging like crazy, and it's a bit of an imbalance that they could patch out maybe, I don't know. The game is fun, the combat is great, don't get me wrong, but it could have been much better. Now there are some really cool abilities in this game and there's plenty for you to learn and grind for. It's not that it's hard for you to get any of the abilities, but the game has so many in it that it's inevitably going to take a long time, and that's a good thing. It gives you a reason to keep going on for technique points. You can throw smoke bombs, kunai, sticky bombs, shoot arrows, throw little bombs on the floor, and even fire poison darts into your enemy. You can level all of these things up to make them much more effective in battle. You have 4 different fighting stances to choose from, and each of them work on enemies in a different way. The stone stance is good against swordsmen, the water stance is effective against shieldmen, the wind stance is effective against spearmen, and the moon stance is effective against brutes. That all sounds cool except for the fact that you don't actually have to switch between these stances to beat any of the enemies. I would often forget which stance I was actually using at the time, and I didn't actually ever feel like I need to change stances. That is of course until the game randomly interrupts you and forces you to switch stances, even though you were perfectly capable in doing what you were doing to get the job done. It's kind of silly, and some measures should have been taken to make the player think more when they have to change stance rather than the game forcing you to do it. But on the flip side of that, apart from when the game will randomly stop you from changing stances, it just lets you do whatever you want in a fight, which I'm sure is going to make for some excellent YouTube videos from people a lot more creative than myself. Now in fairness to the game, the spirit of the samurai swordsmanship is kept intact. While there's no clear distinction between Kenjutsu and Iaijutsu, I think I'm saying that right, it still preserves the way of the samurai well, but for a video game it probably needs a few few more applications to force you to change styles, which would have helped the combat in the long run. It is a ton of fun though, nothing feels clunky, you can seamlessly switch styles during combat, parry is an excellent addition to this game, and you can attack without any stiffness or issues whatsoever, unless of course you get caught by a random glitch. Now it was a double-edged sword for me because although I love how it feels, I'm also disappointed at the lack of range with the styles, they just felt a bit too samey to me. A few minor improvements could have gone a long way, but just like the other weapons that you can level up, you can also buy loads of cool skills and unlock techniques as you progress through the story. There's even this cool ghost mode that you can unlock later in the story that basically one hit kills anything and it looks insanely cool. Again, another great use of colors. Now I'm currently 30 hours in and I'm still haven't unlocked all of the techniques, so it's definitely got something to keep you busy, and having said that, even after my minor criticism of the combat, I never once got bored of it. Think of Sekiro as the Tekken of sword games, very complex, requires detail and finesse at every turn. Think of Neo as Virtual Fighter, again absolutely amazing, robust and complex. Now think of Ghost of Tsushima as Street Fighter, an absolute masterclass in just raw, basic fundamentals, and this is really where I'm at odds with myself. Whilst I didn't really like how simple it was and wanted a little bit more, I also did like how simple it was. I don't know, I'm teetering on the edge of both. It exists in this weird plane of existence. I'm not sure where I'd improve it, but I know that I really enjoyed it and I still want to play it. Now as for the gear, there's a lot to collect as well. You get different gear pieces by progressing through the story, doing side missions and collecting bits and pieces through Tsushima to level up. You can mix and match gear pieces to have your own unique version of Jin, and you can change the colors for most parts of the gear. It's not Soul Calibur levels of customization, but it is still very good. The horse that you control handles really well and moves pretty quickly. You can actually use your horse to come up with some pretty cool ways to take people out, and the horse itself is designed with a level of intelligence. If there's a big tree or a cliff, he'll just move out of the way and not run headfirst into something. You can call your horse from wherever you are on the map and he'll just be out of shot and come running towards you, and it really makes for this seamless experience. You don't have to go running around looking for your horse. You can also fast travel to certain areas that you've already been to that might be taking too long for you to travel to, although this option isn't always available, so be prepared to do some traveling. In general though, things work really well and they work really smoothly, again when you're not being attacked by random glitches. Outside of the glitches, I really don't have too much to complain about here. Also, the load times are really short, which was really nice. So the side quests are where things started to really annoy me. The side quests are plentiful in this game. There are so many of them at every turn on the giant map of Tsushima. If you don't want to play the main story, there's a ton of other things to do. You have your mystic quests, which are more based around the support characters, and then you have regular quests, which all sounds great. But you see, the problem is with this game, a lot of the regular quests feel like the same thing over and over again. Find the Mongols, deliver justice. Track footprints, deliver justice. Hide in the grass, deliver justice quietly. It's the same thing over and over again. And then there's all these fox dens and spas, and they seem kind of cool at the beginning and they give you resolve and health upgrades, but they just get so boring and repetitive. Then you've got the towers filled with Mongols that you have to take over, just like every other game ever made. Now sometimes I did have fun doing it, and that is mainly because the combat is so good. Sometimes I would enjoy jumping into a camp overrun by Mongols and taking on everyone, but there's only so many times before I'm just like, is there anything else to do? There are points where you have to traverse a map to get to a shrine, but I think the problem here is that there's so many of these, it's like, where's the variety? Now granted, in the sea of sameness there are a fair few that are a little different, but man, it seems so far and few between. All the side quests just seem too similar to me. Maybe I've been spoilt by the Yakuza side quests, but I still think there needed to be more here. There needed to be more variety. It gets a little bit painful after a while, but luckily you can do them at your own leisure even after you've beaten the main story. There's no new game plus in this game, which might be disappointing to some, but you can keep on going on until you liberate Tsushima and bring peace back to the land. Hopefully if they do a follow-up to this game, there's more variety in the side missions. The good thing about this game is that whenever you get bored of doing side quests, you could just leave and you can return to them whenever you want to. You don't have to take over a Mongol camp if you've walked into it. You can just walk away. There's nothing that's going to force you back in. I think that really saved the game for me. I love the main story in this game, and it was nice to know that there were no restrictions that would turn the game into an absolute drag. Now to be fair to the side quests again, the Mystic quest did offer variety and they did span over several parts that did lead to some sort of payoff. I did enjoy those for the most part, but not as much as I would have liked. There's definitely room for improvement. I will say that the way the quests are laid out on the menu is really good. It tells you exactly which ones you have left and how many parts in those quests you have left to do. That's a nice touch, and it makes it less annoying for the player considering the sheer scope of the map. It'd be easy to get lost and forget where to find quests if you've just left them to do them later on. Also, during side quests or even mystic quests, like I said before, you can just walk away. You don't need to do it at that moment, and that is a really important touch. Too many times have I been playing an open world game and I've started a quest and I'm like, man, this quest sucks, and I'm just stuck there. I can't do anything. I have to finish it if I want to return to what I was doing before. That's not the case in Ghost of Tsushima. You can literally do whatever you want. The game does not force you to do anything. That is a really important touch. The side quests also play into the map unlocking itself. For as much as I could see, you can just go wherever you want, even if the map is dark there. When you ride or walk over there, it does open up, at least in my experience. Maybe you do get restricted sometimes, but in the 30+ hours I've played this game, I've never encountered an invisible wall or something I couldn't travel to. I see a lot of people saying that this does what Assassin's Creed does, but it really doesn't. In Assassin's Creed, there's a lot of space that just feels like another space you've just come from, and it's like that throughout the entire series. But in Ghost of Tsushima, everything feels and looks different. Yes, there's repetition in quests you encounter, but the world they've built around you looks and feels different wherever you go. Now onto the story. The story is predictable and it's by the book, but man, I've got to tell you, I've got to be honest with you, I absolutely loved it, and this might be the fanboy in me speaking, but I loved it. I'm a sucker for well-told samurai stories. Sometimes predictable isn't always a bad thing. The way the story is told in this blatantly pays homage to the great Akira Kurosawa who we spoke about earlier. It's written all over and it's great. Not to say Kurosawa's work is predictable, but the influence is blatantly there. The story is based during the Kamakura period, even though it looks like the Edo era, and replicates some of the things that took place during that time. Now during this time, the Mongols invaded Tsushima, where they waged war against the samurai and ultimately ended up winning, mostly. Like I said before, the story is not 100% accurate to its period, nor are the contents of its world, but it's a lot of fun. You bond with some of the supporting characters through side quests, especially Yuna, and for me, after playing this, there's really no need to spoil the story for you guys. It's something I'd like for everyone to experience. It has a lot of ups, and it has some downs in the writing, that's for sure, that's definite. It's not perfect, but personally it has way more ups, and it's probably going to take you around 20 odd hours to complete without side quests. I'd say it's well worth it. With side quests you're probably looking at 30 to 40 hours, and with everything all together you're looking at a good 60. Unfortunately in this game the characters are not that interesting. Their personalities are bog standard, and Jin Sakai is your typical stone-faced strong character with a strong sense of justice. The game's story survives on its structure, pacing and the motives. The classic Kurosawa feel is what brings it to life for me, and by the end of it I was really happy with how it played out. The characters do come to life more and more as you go through the story. They do exhibit more emotion as you go through the story, especially when you reach the end, but it could have been better overall. But the story itself, I felt like it made perfect sense. I sympathized with everyone's motives. I grew to like characters more and more no matter what side they were on or whether I agreed with their motives or not. By the end of it I really did feel like a samurai that had become the Ghost of Tsushima. So to summarize, this game was really impressive. It did so many things right, and even though it did things that were wrong, it didn't do them completely wrong. They weren't such massive deals. I don't know if I'd call it a masterpiece, but it's definitely the swan song that PlayStation 4 deserved on its way out. For all of its intense moments, Ghost of Tsushima is a game that really relaxed me. I was able to sit back and just be consumed by the beautiful world that Sucker Punch had put together. It took me a little while to form a complete opinion on this game because it did so much differently from other open world games, and I didn't realize it initially. Where areas felt weak and you got bored, you weren't forced to take part. I wasn't compelled to do anything I didn't want to do in this game. I could just walk away. There was no level brigading in this game. Nothing hinders you. It's a seamless experience akin to meditation. I felt at peace playing this game. I also felt like a samurai. I actually felt like a samurai. I know that's a cliche thing to say, but that's how it made you feel. I felt like the Ghost of Tsushima. The game made me feel like it was up to me to liberate my people. I was completely invested in the main story by the end of it. Now, as I said before just now, this was the swan song that PlayStation 4 deserved. A game that had its faults, but will be remembered, at least for me, as a great look into what it would have been like to be a samurai. And yes, before you say anything, I know it's not totally accurate to the samurai way or the samurai culture, or even the period that it's representing, but I'm thinking of samurais in the theatrical sense and how I used to look at them when I was a child, and to me it replicated that in expert fashion. So to me, Ghost of Tsushima is a definite play. Thanks for watching, guys.